Hi, I'm Aimee Rebmann, and I'm so glad you've joined me to paint today. You're in for a great experience. Now, I want to let you know that I'll be painting at my pace, and that may not necessarily be your pace. So, the beauty of video is that you can push pause and catch up as you need to. You can also rewind and review a concept or a step that we've just gone over. There will also be drawing breaks, and that's a good time to catch up as well. Also, today's painting is really just inspiration, and it's my chance to guide you toward your own masterpiece. So I want you to create something that really speaks to you and make it your own in any way that you'd like to, whether it's just change a couple of colors or maybe add something else to the painting. Now, the most important thing here is to have fun. So, on that note, I'm going to suggest that you go throw on some of your favorite music, grab a refreshment, and let's get started. Cheers! We'll begin by giving ourselves a nice guideline sketch to our painting. I've taken a straight edge and just drawn a line approximately through the middle, as well as down below and up above. What these lines are going to represent is going to be our sky. Will be up in this area here. This is going to be our ocean. We'll have a little sand right here, and then this is going to be the table that our Mai Tai there is sitting on. So we're going to go ahead and then sketch out your glass first, actually, is what I'm going to suggest to you. And that way then you don't have any lines that are going straight through the glass, and you do have your lines then going straight up to the glass. So to get this kind of hurricane glass shape, you're just going to be doing a little curving motion there. Bring it on down, and the same thing on the other side. Of course, I gave myself a little guideline beforehand because trying to draw that from the side here is actually quite difficult. So I do recommend that you do that either on a flat surface or at least straight on so that your canvas is in front of you trying to draw that type of a shape. And then the top here is just basically a straight line with just a hint of a dip to the line for the front part of the glass, and then the same thing but with a slight rise, an arch to the straight line in the back. So it's not, we don't want something really oval. We want it to be fairly straight, but just a hint of an indication that that's a round opening if we were to see it from the top. And then for the base, it's really just two lines here. And then we're going to do a diagonal line out from each side. And then again, we're going to round out this shape here. And again, you can kind of play with that a little bit. And while using your pencil on the canvas, note that it doesn't erase well. So you want to work very, very light. Just, I always say, feather light with your pencil on your canvas. That way then you can either ignore a line that's not in the right place, or maybe you can erase it a bit. Sometimes though, be aware that when you erase, you're going to get a bit of a smudge on your canvas that's sometimes worse than what you're trying to actually get rid of. So just, I think the key there is draw very light with your pencil. You can then always darken up the lines once you kind of get it set. So I always kind of use some sketchy lines that kind of help me get that shape, and I kind of keep playing with it with real light sketchy lines. When I get that shape just how I want it, then I can darken those up and use that darkened line. Know that the paint's going to cover up your lines, so don't worry about leaving some lines that were not quite where you wanted them to be. Okay? So the paints that we're going to be using, we have several colors that we'll use for this painting. So why don't we get started with this little tiny dot of red. So I've got that bright red, a chrome orange, deep yellow, which is kind of an orangey yellow, chrome yellow, chrome green, and we have a cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, violet, raw umber, raw sienna, and we're back to the beginning. Of course, we've got some white there in the middle. So let's get started by painting some of our main colors. We're going to block this out to begin with. So begin now. To color block our painting, we're going to begin by just putting on one layer of each of our main colors. So let's start with our lightest color, which is going to be the table at the bottom. We're going to use a scoop of white, and note that I always load my brush so that we get some nice mingling of color on the canvas rather than mixing a color and then applying it onto the canvas. So I'm taking just a little bit of that bright yellow there with my white, and I'm going to create just kind of a real pretty tablecloth here. So I'm just using a horizontal brush stroke, and the reason that I always want to use a horizontal brush stroke for flat items is to indicate that to the viewer's eye that that's something that is flat. So we'll use the same brush stroke for each of these areas because our sky, our ocean, and our sand, as well as our table, are all something that our eye reads as something that's flat, as opposed to a vertical building or hillsides that will be diagonal lines. So we want to use a horizontal brush stroke for this, and just let those colors mingle there. You can go right around the glass that we've just penciled on there for ourselves. And when you get to straight areas, you want to just lay your brush on and slide it across that straight line. And that's going to maintain a straighter line than if you kind of dab at it. Scoop up some more of my white with a little bit of yellow. Again, that yellow is going to take over really fast, so I'm using actually very little yellow compared to how much white I'm using. Now, of course, you can always choose your own level of saturation of that yellow. If you want a really rich yellow, just don't use very much white, or no white at all for that matter. So we're going to keep going in a horizontal brush stroke all the way across, and later on we'll go ahead and give the bottom underneath edge of our canvas a little bit of color as well. But for right now I'm going to leave it alone, and I'm just going to work on the front of the canvas as well as the sides and the top. So when we do our sky, we'll go ahead and do the top edge there. But we do want to, as we work on the front, we want to always make sure that we wrap whatever we've got going on in the front of the canvas, we want to wrap that around to the side edges as well. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and finish off that side edge. All right. See, I don't mind if there's, some areas that read as richer in that yellow color or whiter or what have you, because I like that kind of mingling of color. It gives it just much more of a feeling of that there's some sunlight and reflectiveness there, and it's a lot easier than trying to maintain the exact same color if it's not just straight out of the bottle. So anyway, I think that we're good with that. Now we don't even need to wash out our brush for this next step because we're going to move right into the sand. And the sand, we want maybe a little touch of white and yellow anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and just dip into this area that I've got a lot of my white paint there, and I'm going to pick up some of my goldish color there called raw sienna, and I'm going to slide this in out here. Now I may have gotten a little bit more yellow than I had intended to. I thought that was more white. So this time I'm going to pick up just white and that raw sienna there. And I'm going to try it over here and see if I'm getting a little different color. Not quite as yellow as you can see there. So what I'm going to do is kind of smooth that out, bring it over here so that I start to get kind of a similar color on each side. And I'll take a little more white and raw sienna, try to tone this down over here a bit too. And worst case scenario, once this dries, I can always go back over it with just white and raw sienna, and that will make it a little more natural sand color. So when we get to the side or the edge of things, we're going to again just slide our brush, slide along this line here, maintaining a nice even line. If you go below the line drawn there, you can always clean it up a little bit, or you can just adjust where your line's going to go. You can also take a little of your paper towel while it's still wet and dip that just a speck in your water, and that will clean up pretty well right there as well. And once again, we want to go all around all of the elements just right in this little sand section. And we're going to do our side edges. And I think we're good there. Okay, I can always clean up this little jump of a line that I did there by just adding my blue from my ocean over that. Now we're also going to have some waves kind of mingling between the sand and the ocean, so I know that I'm going to be doing another layer over that later, so I'm not worried about that little jog up there of my paintbrush. So again, we're going to wash out our paintbrush, stick with our large brush, get all that yellow out of there, and I think I need to wash just a touch more. Dry it off real well with our paper towel, of course. And this time, let's avoid this one. We're going to do that one next, but let's jump up to our sky. And that way then we're not going to pull in some of that goldish yellowish color into our ocean. Right now we're going to let that dry just a little bit. And instead we're going to pick up some white from a nice clean area of our white spot there. And we're going to do just a little bit of our cobalt blue, that lighter blue, onto our brush with the white. So similar to what we did at the bottom here with our yellow. And again, using a horizontal brush stroke, we'll just go right over that. And lay your brush right there on your horizon line where our sky and our ocean are going to be meeting here. And we'll go ahead and get the side edge as well as the top edge. Now, I tell you what, I'm not going to do the top edge right now. I know that you can go ahead and do that, but in order to really get at that, I think I'm going to end up blocking your view, and I don't think that's something that you need to see me do. So we don't need to do that, but just imagine that I have done both my side edges. It's hard to reach, but I'll clean those up later. And then again, our top edge all the way across there as well. And once you have that done, again, you don't need to clean your brush this time, but we can go ahead and do both our ultramarine blue and our cobalt blue. Don't worry if there's a touch of white in there, that's not a problem. And we'll go ahead and fill in with a darker blue into this middle section. And so I'm going to get that finished off. We're going to start letting that dry a bit, and I'll be back in just a few minutes. So we're back from letting this dry a bit now. We've got all of our blue color on there, and I want you to remember that dark colors don't always go on really rich in the first layer, so we always want to do a second layer. And we want to get more depth into this anyway, and that's what we'll do in our second layer. So don't worry if you see some brush marks or some thin paint on the canvas that's kind of letting the canvas show through. All of that will cover up, so don't worry about that and struggle against trying to cover that up. Just let that dry nicely, and then the second layer, once this is dry, is going to go on really nicely. So we can probably just leave the yellow and our sand color, unless there's something about those colors that you're not quite liking. You can always do a second layer on those, but those tend to cover up fairly well. Anything when you use some white in it tends to give good coverage in the first layer. So I think that we're okay there. We're going to maybe do a little design on our tablecloth there. And then we're going to again marry the ocean with the sand by putting some waves in there and such as well. But otherwise, essentially, these are done as well as the sky. Because that white was in there, it probably gave us a pretty good, nice coverage there. Again, if there's anything that you'd like to add into your sky or just give it some better coverage, go ahead and do that on your own. But we're going to move on and do a second layer now onto the ocean area. And we want to get some depth. So during the drying break, I was able to stand up in front of my canvas and straight on and be able to see that as I was painting, I was getting a little crooked on my horizon line. So I tried to even that out a little bit. And the reason for that is that's the one place that we really want to have nice and straight. That actually, and also our table edge. But our horizon line is always seen by the eye as something that's very level. And so we want to keep that nice and straight. So if you've got any dips or what have you, even it out and just make your horizon line higher in the sky if need be. So to give ourselves more interest and depth into our ocean area there, we're going to take a clean, large brush again. So we're working with that large flat brush, dry that out nicely. And this time, back by the horizon line, we want to get some darker color. So we're going to use a little bit of brown, a little bit of our violet, and our ultramarine blue. So we'll use those three deeper colors, and we'll just go ahead and spread that out, again, keeping it as even as you can. I just jumped up a little bit, so I'm going to raise my horizon line that little bit, and I'm going to just go as careful as I can. Again, working from the side angle here is very difficult to maintain very level lines, but I'll do my best and hope that you'll just forgive me if I don't have it just perfect. But know that that's what your goal is to keep that nice and level. So, keep going across there like that. And I'm going to pick up a bit more paint there so that I've got this coming down here as well. And I want to make sure that whenever I do something on the front of my canvas, I carry that around to the side edges so that my image just continues on as if this landscape goes on forever. So we want this nice, expansive view of our ocean. So we've got a lot of color going on there. It's pretty rich. I've got a lot of brown in there. And I'm going to now start kind of going with kind of a middle ground here. So we've got our background. We're going to go with our middle ground of our ocean area there. And this time I'm going to do some of my two blues, but this time I'm going to do a little bit of green. And again, that's going to keep it a little bit darker back there. Now I'm going to swoosh some of this up into the color that I just put on there, but I'll also be bringing it down, you know, again, staying kind of in this middle third area here. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I think I'm going to add just a bit more of my blues. I feel like it's just a touch too green, but again, those are all things that you can decide for yourself as to what you like. So I'm going to just do a little bit more of my blue and spread that out. I'm going to go probably right over the top of my glass there. So again, very carefully sliding my brush along there. And I'm mellowing out some of the dark, rich colors that I put on there by mingling the two sections together. And again, even if I go down here, I'm going to spread it out into a horizontal brush stroke. Same thing here, I come down that edge, but then I spread that out horizontally. So do you see that now I'm getting kind of a nice gradual darkening? It's not that line that we initially put on in the back there by that horizon line. So again, I'm going to do some more of my blues, a little touch of that green. I'm going to get onto my side edges and mellow that out as well. And now we'll do the same thing in this foreground area of our ocean. This time I'm going to use just my cobalt blue. This time I'm going to add a little bit of white into it and that little tiny touch of green. And I'm going to get more of a turquoise up this way. And again, I'm going to spread it out so that it mingles with the color that I just put on there. And that way then we get this nice gradation here of color. So again, I can very carefully go along my glass but then spread it out horizontally. So again, I'm going to put this color over here. Get my side edge. And we do want to kind of make sure that, to some degree, our colors are matching on each side of our glass. Now, if you go into your glass just that little bit like I have, I'm not too worried about it. I can always take my finger and kind of try to mellow out that blue that got in there, but it's not going to be a major problem. I can always, once that's nice and dry there, I'll go ahead and put my drink color over that and that'll cover up. So I think we're good right there. You can always go in and kind of touch up wherever you think might need a little bit more, like it's a little thin up here for me at my horizon line. Some of that is because I jumped up just that little bit and so I was ending up with a first layer again. So again, I'm just going to touch that up, but that can also be touched up later, just as you find you need to do things individually. So at this point, let's go ahead and wash out our brush. And we're going to switch over to our medium flat brush. That's our second largest brush. And let's get a little bit of this fun color going on inside of our Mai Tai glass there. So I'm going to start out by using my yellow and my deep yellow. So that deep yellow, again, that's that kind of orangey yellow. I'm going to switch that one on here in the middle. And I'm just kind of swishing down. I'm not worried about that covering, evenly or anything like that. I'm just swishing some of that into the middle here. And now I'm going to take some of my chrome orange with my deep yellow. And I'm going to start again creating kind of a nice gradual gradation of color here. One thing I want you to notice is that in the middle of my glass, I use a straight down vertical brush stroke. But then as I start to work out toward the curves of the glass, I'm going to allow my brush to curve with me. So it's going to start to curve out and then it's going to get to the curve of the glass. Again, just laying that on there and brushing. And I'm going to add this color up to the top here too. I'm going to stay below this line here. I'm not going to cover in here quite yet, just so that for my own purposes and your own, we'll be able to see where the inside of that glass is at, and then we can always touch up around in there. So again, I'm going to work with my orange and my deep yellow, and I'm going to get that color up in here. Even though I go horizontal across, I then am going to bring these out into vertical brush strokes. It's amazing how much that visual brush stroke actually informs the viewer's eye of kind of what's happening in this painting. So again, I might just kind of swoosh a little bit through here, but I want to maintain a little bit of difference, so I'm going to keep this lighter in the middle. So now we can go ahead and stick with our medium flat brush, get that washed out. And we're going to be using some white. Got just a little clean white left there. And I'm going to have just a tiny hint of brown and a little hint of my ultramarine blue. I mean, just the tiniest bits. And those are going to create kind of a nice grayish tone. So for the base of my glass, I'm going to go ahead and add this over, and do you see that it just already is creating some of those nice reflections and shadows and such in the glass? go like this and go right over the pencil line that I had on there for myself. This is also going to take a few layers, so I think I'm going to need a touch more white on my plate during our drying break. And again, I'm going to use just that little hint of blue, little hint of brown, and that's just going to give us a little bit of variation. So note that I'm using kind of a swishing sort of a brush stroke there, going along these lines, and again, swishing in, and allowing some of this blue and brown to mix on there and give me a little bit of interest already. We're going to be doing more, like I said, in terms of layers on here, so don't worry about it being perfect right now, but just to give you kind of an idea of where we're headed with this. And then I'm going to go up the stem a little bit there, and I'm going to let that dry. At this point, we can stick with our medium flat brush. And we do need a little bit more white. So I'm going to see if I can't steal a little white from some areas that I was just being generous with. But we want just a little bit of white, not too much on our brush anyway. And let's add just a little bit of our shoreline in. So we're just going to kind of marry these two areas right here with a little bit of white. And we can allow some waves to come up here. And this is just the first layer, so again, we're just getting kind of an indication here. So I've just got a little bit of my, I might have a touch of blue in there, but at least you'll kind of see where I'm headed with this. And we're just getting a little bit of our shoreline going on in there. And again, I'm going to do a little on the edge there. And a little bit more going on in here as well. And we're going to do more with that as well, so don't worry about that. At this point, let's let all of this dry again for just a few minutes. So take about 10 or 15 minutes, let that dry, and then we'll come back. We're going to add a second layer onto our drink and onto our waves. We'll add some fun things maybe going on onto our tablecloth there, and we'll get this finished up. Be back in a few minutes. Okay, so we've let that dry a bit more now, and we can add another layer. And this is going to start to really finish things off better. So let's go ahead and stick with that medium flat brush, getting that nicely washed out and dried. And now we're going to add just a little hint of our brown into the right side. We're going to make that right side our shadow side. And it's not so much that we're making this super realistic, but I do want to just give a little dimension by adding a little touch of brown. So I've added just the tiniest bit of brown to the tip of my brush. I've tapped it off even a little bit on my plate so it's not too heavy. And I'm just going to give myself a little bit of shadow right in here. And I'm going to let that kind of just dissipate up the edge of the glass. So do you see how it just gets real thin up here? It's a little thicker as it comes down here and sweeps to the bottom here. And then it's going to make its way up again, up here toward the rim. I'm going to need just a little hint more paint there again. And I'm going to swoosh this in from the edge. Just give myself a little shadow there. I'm going to use what's left over on my brush because I don't want too much paint on here, because again I want this to look like it's generally kind of clear. And I'm going to do the same thing by adding just a little bit of this dryish brush here on the right side. And I can kind of swish it just a little bit as my brush becomes so dry that there's virtually no paint left on there. So using this dry brush technique is actually great for adding just really subtle hints of color to your painting. So again, we're just adding a little hint right there. We're going to be adding more on top of that, so don't think that that's finished. So we'll let that dry while we add a bit more color. So I'm going to dip again into my deep yellow, and I'm going to get some more of that on in the middle here. Basically just doing a second layer of how we started with this last time. And now I'm going to take my deep chrome orange with my deep yellow and get some more color there going. And we're going to go right over that brown shadow that we just created. So again, a little bit more of that orange there perhaps. Going right over the shadow so that that mellows that out. Again, straight up in the middle, curving out with the shape of the object. In this case, it's our glass. And we're going to get up here and crisp up those edges of our glass, because something man-made like this has very crisp edges, and that's why we want to lay our brush onto the side edge there and allow that to stay nice and crisp. Now, things that are natural can have more of a jagged, sort of a rough edge, something more natural and organic. But we'll stay up here about like this. And I think I'm going to add just a hint of white to my brush with my deep yellow. And I'm going to emphasize the little bulge here in the middle of the glass. So as that hurricane glass kind of bulges out, I want to emphasize that just a little bit there. So I'm going to create kind of a little bulge like this with little curves and a little straight down in the middle. And I'm just sweeping very lightly with my brush on the canvas. And that's going to create some nice feathery, soft effects. So once again now, with what's barely left over on my brush, I want to add just a hint of this color as if it's reflecting into the base of my glass, just a little bit. So I'm just going to add just a little bit of this color right in there. So it's not such a harsh transition. I think I got maybe just a hint too much there, but I can mellow that out by smearing it out right now, but I'm also going to be adding some white over that. That will mellow that out quite a bit more, but it'll still allow that orangey color to shine through just a little bit. So I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to go ahead and allow this dry brush to keep working for me, and I'll just kind of add some more hints of color right in there, but not all over. We don't want to cover it all up. So at this point, I'm also going to, I think I need just a hint more color up in the top part of this glass. I'm going to take a little bit more white, some more of my deep yellow, and I think I'm going to stick with those colors up here for right now. And remember that the white will always help block. So I have some pencil lines. I'm not sure you can see them, but I can see them. And if that's what you're experiencing as well, I want to get those covered up. And so I knew that by putting a little bit of white on my brush, that was going to help to block the pencil lines that I'm seeing through there. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, keeping my brush on the canvas and sliding, I'm going to keep a nice crisp edge. And do the same thing over here, and that's helping to cover up some of those pencil lines that I had still showing a bit. If I want that to be richer in color, a little more orange or what have you, I can always add that on. If it takes it right now, great. Otherwise, I can let that dry a little bit and just add over it. So something to know about acrylic paint is that it's a very forgiving paint, and you can always change things. I love that about it, but it allows me to make decisions as I paint, and allows me to allow the journey to guide me in my painting and not be too set on that things have to be just a certain way. So I hope that you're experiencing that as well. And I can always keep layering over and changing it up a little bit as I choose to. Sometimes it will allow me to while it's still wet, and and sometimes it won't. If you're fighting it and it's not changing the way that you want to, just let it dry about 15 minutes and you'll be good to go, and just go ahead and paint over that, and that should change it up. If you're going from a dark color to a light color, it may require a couple of layers, and when I say layers, you need to let that dry in between layers, but it will change. So that's a wonderful thing about acrylic. It makes it very easy to work with as a beginner in particular. So again, I'm going to just kind of keep playing with these colors. Some of that brown shadow that I put on there is still showing through. I didn't necessarily want it to be real dark, but I just wanted it to kind of indicate a little bit of dimension on my glass, and therefore I'm letting that just be. Now I'm going to put some more orange on here, and I'm just going to kind of feather it out. So I'm just using my chrome orange, and I'm just sweeping this up, and again letting this feather out. So I'm maintaining this feeling of like the different colors, the different juices, and I think that's, you know, some sort of a brown liqueur that, you know, is kind of put in there at the top. And I want to say amaretto, but I might be wrong there. At any rate, you get the idea that we want that feeling that there's juiciness in this glass. There's that mingling of all these wonderful colors. And so by, you know, continuing to just keep playing with it and add these colors, it's going to give us that feeling that, that there's a lot going on inside this glass. And of course, this is the primary focus of our painting. We want it to be nice and interesting. So keep playing with that. If you don't like something you did, remember that you're working with a very forgiving paint. Let it dry, and then you can try again. So I think I'll go ahead and move on from here. Of course, I could keep playing with this and perfecting it, but generally I think we've got the idea here going on. I've got just a little spot here that I feel like is not covering up quite as I would like. I keep wanting to play with it and try to cover that up, but I know better. I need to let that dry, and then I'll be able to work with that again. So at this point, let's wash that paintbrush out. And I'm going to suggest that we go now to our small flat brush. And let me see here, we've got that one here. And with our small flat brush, that's the one that has more of a rectangular brush head on there instead of that small pointy brush. And the reason we want to use this is not only will it give a touch more coverage, but it'll also give us some of our nice brush strokes and texture that we're looking for in order to create more of this reflective area of our glass. So I'm going to now take just white and go right over what I've already done on the base of my glass. And it's still going to show through a little bit, but it's going to start mellowing out all of these things that we've done as well. And I'm just going to skirt in there. And I'm going to do the same thing up here at the rim. I want to just take it very, very light with a very dryish brush. So what's left over from when I did this, I'm not dipping back in my paint. And I'm just going to tap over the edge of my glass very, very lightly here and allow some kind of reflectiveness to happen on the edge of my glass. Now I think need to pick up just a hint more paint. And I'm going to actually take just a little bit on my brush, kind of tap it off, and take a little tiny bit of my brown in there so that it's not so pure white. And again, very little paint, I should say, on my brush. And I'm going to, again, just kind of go along that rim and allow kind of a reflective quality to happen there. And I can also maybe do a bit of reflection as it's coming down the edge of this glass here. And maybe just a little bit here too. You see how I'm using that kind of curving, sort of like a parenthesis mark there? So I'm using that there on this side of the glass there as well. So I'm getting some highlight reflections on this side. I've got my low light shadows on this side, so it's helping to create a little more dimension on that glass. And maybe just a touch here in the middle. Again, if it's in the middle, it's going straight down. If it's on the sides, it's following the shape of the object. Okay? Now, I have to say, I'm kind of feeling like I want just a hint more of like a, you know, that wide lip to my glass. So I'm going to change the shape of my glass right now. I don't have to worry about that. It's not what I drew originally. But I'm going to add just a little bit more of a splayed side here to the edges. And I'm going to need just a little bit of white so that that starts to block some of the blue that's behind it. So I'll take a little bit of white on my brush with my deep yellow and my orange. And I'm going to brace, you see I'm bracing the side of my hand here on my canvas and giving myself just a little bit more of a curve there at the top. And I think that just makes a more attractive glass. So I'm just going to let that be. I know that it's not going to cover in that first layer. I'm just going to leave that, and I can always touch it up as I add things to the top there. So I'm going to rinse this out now, and I'm going to go back into my whites and browns and add just a little bit more dimension down at the base of my glass. So again, my ultramarine blue, a little touch of brown, and some white. I'm going to kind of tap it off. It's giving me sort of a grayish color. And I'm going to just slide a little bit of that in there. And I want it to be sort of sweepy so that I get that feeling of, you know, reflective glass. So we don't want it to be too solid. I'm going to take just a little bit of just pure white now and add that on my highlight side here. Again, sweeping that in toward the center in kind of a slight curve. Can go right up the edge of the glass here. And I think that's feeling pretty good. I might do just a few little deeper brownish blue swishes there. If I feel like it's too much, I can always go back over it with some more white. So it's sort of a push and pull journey, and just keep going back and forth, add some, bring it back, mellow it out, add a little more. So again, every painting is its own journey and its own result. So every time I paint this, it'll be slightly different. But it's always fun to have the journey of the painting kind of guide you and play with it. So allow yourself to have fun with that. All right, so I think that we're getting there on that. I think I want just a hint more of my brown to show that this glass is, you know, it's turning and it's got a little curve to the base there. So even though this is the shadow side, it can still have some of those reflective shadows. So it's not that it's all white, but it may just have some stronger highlights mixed with your shadows. That's all. All right, so I think we've got something pretty good going on there. I think I'm going to take the leftovers on this brush, that dryish thing, and I'm going to elongate the rim here. Even though it's mixing a little with my orange, that's okay. All right, I think we're ready to add some fruit into that cup, or into that glass. All right, I'm going to go down to my small little round brush now. So that's the smallest brush that we're working with. And I'm going to start by just kind of outlining with a little bit of my gold and brown. So I'm just going to dip a little gold, raw sienna there, and your raw umber, so the goldish color and the brown, and I'm going to create that pineapple shape. So the pineapple shape is really just going to be kind of sitting, it's a little, you know, wedge that's sitting in the glass. So we're just going to go about like that. And we're going to triangle that down, but it's going to disappear. So note that for anything that's sitting inside the glass, we're going to go over the back edge, and we're going to take it and have it stop at the front edge. So I'm going to bring this down in here. Now I'm going to add a little white to my brush because again we need to block the blue that we have behind it. And so I'll do a little bit of my yellow and white and that raw sienna, and I'm just going to kind of fill that in. And we'll work on that pineapple a little bit more later. So we've just kind of designated where it's going to be at this point. And it's going to stop at that edge there. We're not going to see anything below the edge, and it's also not going to stop at the back edge. We want to see it sitting inside the cup there. We also want to do a little cherry. So wash your brush out there. And here's where that little dot of red's going to come in. So we're going to pick up a little bit of that red on the tip of our brush there. And I'm going to see just a little overlap over my pineapple. And it's going to be like a little, it's almost like a sun setting on that front rim of the glass. So see how it's just nice and round, and then it's just going to stop there. So we're just going to let that be. So again, we're just going to let those sit there just like that. Let's also get our umbrella in there. Wouldn't be a tropical drink without a little fruity umbrella, right? So this one we're going to use some white as well. And let's do a little green and yellow. So I've got white, green, and yellow. Now if you choose a different color, that's absolutely fine. But basically what we're going to do is create kind of an angled little triangle there. I think I'm going to get a touch more green on my brush to make it more green. But this is going to keep it looking a little bit more of a springy green. And I'm going to just do a little bit. Maybe I'll bring this down a little bit. So a bit of a wavy edge there. And it's going to go out and have some area there that's like being supported by the glass. So again, we're just kind of drawing it out with our paintbrush there. And we're going to be doing a second layer on here and some details and all to make that really pop. But for now, we're just trying to kind of designate its spot. So it's just kind of a little, you know, like a slide and a point, a slide and a point. So it's like these little tiny arches and little points then, you know, in between. So fill that in just a little bit more there, trying to get some coverage over that blue ocean that we had put on there. And at this point I can also wash out my brush. And now I know where like the back of my glass is, as well as maybe the inside rim there. So now I am going to add just a little bit of my blues, because that's what's going to show now in terms of what's reflecting through here. So I actually want to add a little bit of blue in here. And I'm going to be real careful to keep it just where it should be. So it's just going to be between the back rim of the glass and the front rim of the glass, and right up to my fruit there. But I also am going to have a little area there that we would be seeing through right here below the rim of the glass. Now, of course, we're hoping that we get a nice full glass of this yummy Mai Tai here, but let's assume that there's just a hint of the glass here at the rim that does not have our cocktail actually right up to the rim. Okay, then we're going to mellow that out with some of our kind of clearish white glass effect. I'm going to take some of my white with just that little tiny hint of my blue and brown, but mainly white. And I'm going to emphasize the rim of the glass here, but then I'm also going to kind of mellow this out here. And I'll get just a little bit more of my glass on there. Again, we're going to mellow it out back here as well. And we're just getting kind of an indication of what's happening there. So, I'm thinking I want to add maybe just a little bit more of my juice color back on there. So again, these are all decisions that you can make, but by using the white, that's always going to help to block. So I'm going to bring my juice color up just a little bit more. So again, I can keep playing with this and making a new decision based on what I put on there and how I like it. So again, I'm going to create more horizontal strokes there. And if there's a little bit of shadow in there, it really is just looking like the fruit that's sitting inside the glass there anyway. Excuse me. All right. I'm going to go back now to my medium flat brush. And let's work on our waves while our fruit and our umbrella are all drawing there, and then we'll go back in and give them some details. So, my medium flat brush, I'm going to use my white again, and I'm going to use just a little tiny hint of, actually I think I'll use my Cobalt blue as just a little bit of a tint. But mainly I want it to be white, just not pure white. And so again, I'm going to now kind of just swoosh in. And now this is too blue, but that's okay, because I'm going to do another layer over it. So I'm getting my waves crashing up onto the shore here. And since this has already got a little bit of that bluish color in it, I'm going to go ahead and start to give myself just little dryish brush strokes. You see how my dry brush is really working for me here? And it's just giving me some indications of some of that breaking waves, you know, the water there out there, that it's starting to roll in toward the shore. So we're just using that dryish brush there, and a horizontal brush stroke. So make sure it stays nice and horizontal. You can, you know, give yourself a little bit more here and there. And we're going to get kind of feeling of the waves that are starting to roll toward the shore. Now we're going to take just white, since I was too blue here, and now I'm going to tap it in and get a little foaminess of the water here, right on top of that bluish color. And a little bit more in there. Getting my edges. Remember, I don't want to ever forget about my edges. And I'm just kind of tapping it in so that I get a little bit of texture of that foamy water rushing up onto that shore. So I'm going to come back over here and keep working both sides. And edges there. And you can see that that's now working better for me. So now we've got our rushing shore coming up. We've got nice depth in our ocean. We've got our tablecloth here that needs just a little something, I think. So of course this could be any design that you'd like to create there. That's a great way to personalize this painting. And so I think I'll just do something very, very simple with maybe just some stripes. And so I'm going to use my small flat brush again. Still, I'm letting these items dry here so that I can get a nice finishing feel to my next layer on those. But I'm kind of thinking that if I'm going to make this kind of green, I think I'll mimic the color here in a stripe onto my tablecloth. Now you could do, floral design, you could do anything that you feel would represent you. But like I said, I'm going to keep it nice and simple here. I'm going to use some yellow and some green. And I'm just going to do some stripes right down. Now they could be straight stripes. Excuse me, straight stripes. Okay, I think I said that, but that's actually kind of a tongue twister. And, or they could have a little wave to them, so they could kind of snake down. So that might be kind of fun. And again, if I don't like that, I can just straighten it out and make it a little bit wider. So you can play with that a little bit and see what you like. So I don't know, I kind of think I'll do this little curving stripe. I'm going to take that all the way down to the base of my canvas. I'll probably need a second layer on there. As you can see, it's kind of leaving brush strokes. That's okay, it's that whole dark color situation. That's what happens with the darker colors. So again, I take some more yellow and green, and I'll just create another little wavy stripe there. And so I want to create, a pattern here, so we can imagine that one's coming under here, so maybe this one starts about there. And I'm going to move this up onto the edge of my easel there so that I can get to the base of my canvas. Again, don't forget to paint the bottom edge underneath of your canvas. Not that it's really going to be seen much, but it generally will be nicer to have that finished off rather than just your raw canvas there. And let's see here. Not too sure I'm liking that coming straight from underneath of the glass. So I have to say, I think I'm going to change it. So I'm going to dunk my brush in there, and while that's still fairly wet, I can take my damp paper towel and I can remove a good amount of it. I won't be able to remove everything, but I can kind of brush at that, and oh goodness, I might be able to get rid of it completely. But if not, I'll just get rid of as much as I can, and then I can paint over with my original color. So, I think what I'll do here, yeah, I think that cleaned up pretty well. So I'm going to have to rethink my design just a little bit. So maybe there are stripes, but then maybe there's kind of like a little star pattern of, or some sort of a central pattern going on down here. So I think I'm going to keep the stripes on each side of my glass. So these are all the things that you learn as you kind of do a painting, is you can kind of rethink it and go, I thought that was going to work well, but maybe it wasn't the best decision. So there would have been one here, so if I keep things centered, I'm going to just kind of go right over here again. And I think maybe make that one just a little bit wider. And again, one more here, trying to maintain some evenness. Not that it has to be just perfect. And I can always kind of perfect all of this more so in my second layer. So if I am thinking, gosh, maybe I'll create some sort of a, I don't know, some sort of a pattern. Maybe I'll use this small round brush to do that. And I think maybe I'll create sort of a little sun pattern, if you will. It could even be a different color. But I'll go ahead and stay with this, and maybe I'll sort of just do something like this, as if to indicate that this is kind of the center of that tablecloth, and that I have some sort of a different pattern here in the center. And I think that that is better than that stripe coming right straight out of that glass. So again, your decision on what you'd like to do for your pattern, but hopefully this just gives you a little bit of an idea and maybe just some guidance as to how to go about designing that in terms of having it work well with the overall composition. So, looks like I've gotten a little bit of paint here in my glass, so I'm just going to scrape that off just because I can tell that it still will scrape off. I think that must have come down from my pineapple or something like that. So again, little tricks here. If it didn't come off, I'd just go over that with my, my juice colors there as well. But at this point, I'm going to be letting these stripes dry, and I'll go back now to my fruit and my little umbrella there for my drink. So back to my small round brush. And I'm going to get a little more color onto my umbrella. I'll be letting that dry while I work on the fruit. So I'm going to go a little bit more color there. You see how that's covering up nicely in the second layer. This time we can add a little stick coming down from the center of our umbrella as well. So that's going into the glass. I'm going to rinse that brush out. And I'll do a little bit of my raw sienna and my brown perhaps. I'll see how that looks. So I'm going to imagine that it's coming down from the center there. So I'll just go right there, add a diagonal. And I can always add a second layer onto that if it hasn't covered quite well enough. And I think I'll stick with that, those colors there, that raw sienna there with that brown. And I'm going to go ahead and outline my pineapple. And if it's not quite the color you want, you can always add like maybe a little touch of your white to that. See how that looks. And again, just let the brush give you kind of a natural mingling of colors. Don't try to make it too perfect. That starts to look too graphic-like. Unless you like that. So if that's the style that you're going for, of course, you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do a little bit of my yellow and that goldish color, that raw sienna, and some white. And I'm going to work in kind of the shape of a wheel, or think of a lady's fan that spreads out from a center point. So if this is my center point that's pointing down into my drink, then I'm going to work in little strokes that go out from there. Again, I'm going to go right over my cherry there. I think I'd like just a little bit maybe more white and yellow, so it's a little bit juicier and brighter looking. So I'll add that right over it. But with each layer that I add, I'm getting a little bit more of the texture of the pulp of that pineapple. So don't be afraid to kind of keep layering over, and even maybe if you need to, let it dry a little bit and then add a little bit more over it. So I'm going to do a little bit of white here, and it's going to allow some of those colors I've just put on there to still show through. It's not going to end up being pure white. And I think I'm getting more of what I want there. I've got a little texture, I've got some variation of color, and I think I'm going to wash my brush out there since I've got white on there, because I don't want white. And I'm going to do just a hint more of that brown with a touch of the raw sienna gold, and I'm going to touch up the, the outside edge there of my pineapple. And then maybe even add just a few little stripes with what's left over on my brush. And from there, I'm going to rinse that out again. I'm going to give my cherry one more layer. And I'm also going to give myself a little stem for my cherry. That's always a cute element on cherry. So we're going to, again, put another layer of that red onto the cherry. And I think I'll do just a little hint of brown with my red for the cherry stem. And I'm going to actually have that overlap my pineapple so that it's real evident. Okay? Even overlap my umbrella a little bit. And that way then I really see that stem. And I could always mellow that stem a little bit with a touch more of my brown. And I think I might even take just a hint of white kind of mixed on there and work in just a touch of a highlight there. If it's too much, I can go right into my red again and tap over that and allow just a little hint of that highlight to show. Rinse that out, and I think I'll just give myself a little bit of a design on my umbrella. So I'm kind of thinking of going backwards here. So instead of, the green stripes on the yellow, I'll do some yellow stripes on the green umbrella. So we may need to let this dry just a touch more, but I'm going to try it right now. I'm going to take some yellow and white, and I'm just going to do a little edge there maybe on my umbrella. It's kind of cute. And then I'll just do some little wavy lines, maybe working their way up. And I think that finishes it off kind of cute. So, also emphasize those a little bit more. Maybe even do a little hint of one going up there. I'm going to rinse that brush out once more, and I'm going to give my, the little stem, let's say, of my umbrella just one more coat so that it stands out fairly well. And again, that's going to stop at the edge, the front edge of the glass, overlaps the back edge. And I think at this point, just maybe one more layer on my stripes, that decoration there on my tablecloth, and we'll have our painting. So again, I can, at this point, just kind of crisp this all up. It's had a chance to dry a little bit. I think it's going to take that second layer pretty nicely. If it's still a little thin looking, it just means that it needs to dry a bit more. So you can judge how ready your design there is. And get that on there. And if there are any other little things that you want to touch up, whether it's, maybe it's the waves in the ocean, or maybe you just want another layer on your sky, or whatever it might be. You can always just play with that on your own time there and finesse whatever you feel you need to do at this point to finish this off. And you can sign it, and I think we'll be complete. So, I think we're ready. So thank you so much for joining me today to paint. It's always a fun journey, and I hope that you'll join me again soon. Thanks so much.